The first rays of morning sunlight spilled across endless rows of grapevines, painting the rolling hills in soft shades of gold. Dew shimmered on every leaf as birds welcomed another quiet day in the small town of Willow Creek. To anyone passing by, the old vineyard looked peaceful, almost magical. But appearances could be deceiving. Hidden behind its beauty were unpaid bills, failing equipment, shrinking harvests, and a mountain of debt that grew larger every single month. For Olivia Bennett, however, the vineyard wasn't just a business. It was home. At 28 years old, Olivia had spent nearly every day of her life walking these fields beside her grandfather. He had taught her how to recognize healthy vines, predict the weather by studying the clouds, and taste grapes before they were ready for harvest. He believed every vineyard had its own heartbeat, and if someone cared enough to listen, the land would always tell them what it needed. After his passing 3 years earlier, Olivia inherited everything, including every financial problem he had quietly hidden from the family. The tractors were old. The wine cellar desperately needed repairs. Orders from longtime customers had declined. Large commercial wineries had flooded the market with cheaper products, leaving family-owned vineyards like they're struggling to survive. Still, Olivia refused to give up. Every morning before sunrise, she inspected the vines herself. Every afternoon she managed paperwork, deliveries, and visitors. Every evening she stayed late repairing fences, cleaning barrels, or preparing orders. She was exhausted. But she never complained. Because quitting would mean losing the last piece of her grandfather still alive. Unfortunately, the bank didn't care about memories. The final payment deadline arrived on a cool Thursday morning. Olivia sat inside the tiny office overlooking the vineyard as the bank manager slid another envelope across the desk. "I'm sorry," he said gently. "You've done everything you could." She stared silently at the documents. "The property has officially been sold." The words felt unreal. She looked out the window toward the vineyard stretching across the hills. "This land has been in my family for almost 80 years. I know. There has to be another option." He slowly shook his head. "The buyer paid in full yesterday." Olivia swallowed hard. "Who bought it?" The manager hesitated. Then he answered with 2 words that meant nothing to her. "Ethan Blackwood." She frowned. "The hotel billionaire?" The manager nodded. "He recently purchased several properties throughout the region." Olivia felt her stomach sink. Everyone knew who Ethan Blackwood was. Business magazines called him the youngest CEO to transform a struggling luxury hotel empire into one of the fastest-growing hospitality companies in the world. Investors admired him. Competitors feared him. Employees respected him. Journalists described him using the same words over and over. Brilliant, cool, unreachable. He wasn't known for sentiment. He bought businesses, restructured them, sold them, or replaced them with something far more profitable. If he had purchased the vineyard, its future was already decided. 3 days later, expensive black SUVs rolled slowly through the vineyard gates. Workers stopped pruning vines. Neighbors gathered along the fences. Everyone watched. The first vehicle door opened. A tall man stepped onto the gravel road wearing a charcoal suit despite the warm spring weather. His movements were calm, precise. Every step looked planned. At 35, Ethan Blackwood carried himself with effortless confidence. His dark hair was neatly styled, and his sharp gray eyes scanned the property as if calculating every square foot. Behind him followed architects, lawyers, financial advisors, construction engineers. To them, the vineyard was simply another investment. To Olivia, it was everything. She walked across the gravel driveway until she stood directly in front of Ethan. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. Finally, "I'm Olivia Bennett." "I know. I'm guessing you didn't come to taste wine." "No." His voice was calm and surprisingly soft. "I came to inspect my property." Those words stung more than she expected. My property. Not our vineyard. Not this place. Just property. Olivia folded her arms. "What exactly are you planning?" Ethan accepted a folder from one of his assistants before opening detailed architectural drawings. A luxury wellness resort. She looked down. Swimming pools. Private villas. Spa facilities. Conference halls. Helicopter landing pads. The vineyard barely existed on the plans. Most of it had been erased. She looked back at him. "So you're destroying everything?" "I'm replacing an unprofitable business with one that creates greater economic value. My grandfather spent 60 years building this place. And I'm responsible for making productive use of land I legally purchased." His answer wasn't cruel. It was simply, emotionless, like discussing numbers instead of lives. The workers nearby lowered their heads. Some quietly walked away. Others stared at the ground. Olivia realized they weren't just losing jobs. They were losing families, traditions, and futures. She took one slow breath. You've already made your decision without spending a single day here. I've reviewed every financial report. Financial reports don't tell stories. They tell facts. No, Olivia replied quietly. They only tell the parts someone decides to measure. For the first time, Ethan actually looked at her instead of through her. There was determination in her eyes. Not desperation. Not anger. Conviction. She continued. You believe this land has failed. It has. I disagree. He raised one eyebrow. Based on emotion? Based on something spreadsheets can't calculate. Silence settled between them again. Finally, Olivia spoke the words that surprised even herself. Stay here. Ethan frowned. What? 1 month. She pointed toward the vineyard stretching across the hills. Live here for 30 days. My schedule doesn't allow that. If you're so certain you're right, 30 days shouldn't change anything. One of Ethan's lawyers stepped forward. Mr. Blackwood, this isn't necessary. Olivia ignored him. Walk these fields. Meet the families. Harvest the grapes. Listen before you erase 80 years of history. The lawyer laughed softly. Ethan remained silent. She took one final step closer. If, after 1 month, you still want to tear everything down. Her voice cracked for the first time. I'll hand you the keys myself. The surrounding crowd became completely still. Even the wind seemed to stop. Ethan studied Olivia for several long moments. She wasn't negotiating for money. She wasn't asking for ownership. She was asking for time. And strangely, that interested him. Finally, he closed the architectural folder. 30 days. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. You have 1 month, Ethan said calmly. But understand something. He looked directly into Olivia's eyes. I have never changed a business decision because of emotion. Olivia gave a small, determined smile. Good. Because I don't intend to convince the businessman. She glanced toward the endless vineyard glowing beneath the afternoon sun. I intend to introduce you to the man you've forgotten how to be. For the first time in years, someone had spoken to Ethan Blackwood without fear. And although he would never admit it, those words stayed with him long after everyone else had fallen silent. 30 days. That was all Ethan Blackwood had agreed to. To his executives, it was a meaningless delay. To Olivia Bennett, it was the only chance left to save everything her family had built. The following morning, Ethan arrived at sunrise dressed in expensive hiking boots instead of polished leather shoes. His assistant had arranged temporary accommodations inside the old manor house overlooking the vineyard. The home was elegant in its own rustic way, though far removed from the glass penthouses and luxury hotels Ethan was accustomed to. The wooden floors creaked with every step, antique clocks chimed through the hallways, and photographs of generations past covered the walls. Olivia greeted him with a simple smile. Good morning. You start early. We always have. She handed him a pair of worn leather gloves. You'll need these. Ethan stared at them. I didn't come here to become a farmer. No, Olivia replied with a playful smile. You came here to understand what you're planning to destroy. Reluctantly, he slipped the gloves on. Within an hour, his perfectly pressed shirt was covered with dust. His hands ached from trimming vines. His expensive watch nearly caught on old fencing. By noon, sweat rolled down his forehead. The workers exchanged amused glances. Watching the billionaire struggle with simple vineyard tasks became the day's unexpected entertainment. Olivia couldn't hide her laughter when Ethan accidentally sprayed himself with water while trying to repair an irrigation pipe. You think that's funny? He asked. A little. I've negotiated billion-dollar mergers. And today you lost a fight with a garden hose. Even Ethan couldn't stop the corner of his mouth from lifting. It was the first genuine smile anyone there had seen from him. Days slowly turned into weeks. Each morning Olivia showed him another part of the vineyard. The ancient wine cellar. The small chapel where generations had celebrated weddings. The orchard planted by her grandmother. The hillside where local families gathered every autumn for the harvest festival. Every place carried memories. Every person carried stories. Ethan had spent most of his life measuring success through numbers. Profit margins. Quarterly earnings. Stock prices. But here, people spoke about loyalty. Tradition. Community. One afternoon they stopped beside an elderly worker named Samuel, who had cared for the vines for over 40 years. Samuel smiled warmly. I remember carrying Olivia around these fields when she was only 5. Olivia laughed. I probably slowed everyone down. You reminded us why we worked so hard. Samuel looked toward Ethan. This vineyard never belonged to one family. It belonged to everyone willing to protect it. Those words lingered in Ethan's mind long after the conversation ended. One rainy evening, electricity briefly failed across the estate. Candles illuminated the dining room while rain tapped softly against the windows. Without television, computers, or phone signals, there was nothing to distract them. Olivia prepared homemade pasta using her grandmother's recipe. Ethan watched in surprise. You cook. I had to learn. I usually have chefs. I'm aware. He smiled slightly. I've never actually made pasta. She raised an eyebrow. Seriously? I know how to run international corporations. Congratulations. She placed flour on the table. Tonight you're learning something useful. For nearly an hour, Ethan struggled to roll dough into proper shapes. Olivia laughed every few minutes. By the time dinner was ready, flour covered the kitchen counters. And Ethan's face. You've got something? She stepped closer, brushing a streak of flour from his cheek. For just a moment, neither of them moved. The room grew strangely quiet. Their eyes met. Neither seemed eager to step away. Then the oven timer rang loudly. Both quickly looked elsewhere. Neither mentioned the moment again. But both remembered it. The annual Willow Creek Harvest Festival arrived sooner than expected. For decades, the festival had celebrated the town's farming traditions. Music echoed through the streets. Children laughed while running between food stalls. Artists displayed handmade crafts. Local musicians filled the evening air with folk songs. Olivia insisted Ethan attend. If you're going to judge this place, she said, you should see what it really means. At first, Ethan remained uncomfortable. People recognized him immediately. Some whispered. Others openly questioned why the billionaire was there. Yet slowly, everything changed. Children convinced him to judge a pie contest. An elderly couple invited him to dance. Local farmers thanked him simply for listening. Nobody asked about his wealth. Nobody cared about his company. For one evening, he wasn't a billionaire. He was simply Ethan. As fireworks exploded above the vineyards that night, Olivia stood beside him watching the colorful lights reflect across the hills. It's beautiful, Ethan admitted quietly. It always has been. I almost replaced all of this with concrete. Olivia looked at him. But you haven't. No. For the first time in years. Ethan wasn't entirely sure he wanted to. A few days later, while searching the oldest section of the wine cellar for historical records, Ethan noticed a loose stone hidden behind several dusty barrels. Curious, he carefully removed it. Behind the stone rested a small iron box coated in decades of dust. Olivia knelt beside him. I've never seen that before. Inside the box lay faded photographs, old property maps, and a sealed envelope. Across the front, written in elegant handwriting, were 5 words. For Jonathan Blackwood only. Ethan froze. Jonathan Blackwood. His father. He carefully broke the brittle wax seal. The letter had been written almost 30 years earlier by Olivia's grandfather. As Ethan silently read each line, his expression slowly changed. Confusion. Disbelief. Regret. Olivia watched nervously. What is it? Ethan looked up slowly. My father. He struggled to finish the sentence. He promised your grandfather that no matter what happened. Ethan's voice became quieter. Our family would always protect this vineyard. Olivia stared at him. What? Ethan handed her the letter. Together they read every word. Years ago their grandfathers had been close friends. During a devastating economic recession, Olivia's grandfather had secretly helped Jonathan Blackwood avoid bankruptcy by lending him money without asking for repayment. Jonathan had vowed that one day he would return the kindness. But before he could fulfill that promise, family conflicts separated them. Business pressures pulled them apart. Then Jonathan passed away unexpectedly. The promise was forgotten. Until now. Ethan slowly folded the fragile letter. I bought this land believing it was just another investment. He looked around the ancient cellar. It turns out. His voice was filled with quiet regret. My family owed yours a debt that can never truly be repaid. Neither of them noticed the shadow standing outside the cellar entrance. A man wearing a dark jacket quietly lowered his camera after photographing the two of them together. He smiled to himself before disappearing into the darkness. By the following morning, Those photographs would be sitting on the desk of someone determined to destroy Ethan Blackwood's reputation. The following Monday, Ethan walked into the headquarters of Blackwood International expecting another routine board meeting. Instead, every member of the board was waiting for him. Their expressions were cold. On the large screen behind them appeared photographs taken outside the vineyard. There was Ethan smiling beside Olivia. Another showed them leaving the wine cellar together. Another captured Olivia touching flour from Ethan's cheek during the evening they cooked together. None of the photos were inappropriate, but they were carefully arranged to tell a different story. One board member leaned forward. Care to explain why you've delayed a $3 billion development because of a vineyard? Another added, our investors are demanding answers. Ethan remained calm. I'm still evaluating the property. You've had enough time. The decision isn't final. The chairman placed another folder on the table. We've also discovered the letter. Ethan's eyes narrowed. You searched my office? We did what was necessary. The chairman folded his hands. A 30-year-old promise between two old friends doesn't justify risking this company's future. Another director spoke sharply. The resort project moves forward next month. Ethan looked around the room. Every face waiting for him cared about only one thing: profit. For years he had been exactly like them. Today, something felt different. I'll make my decision after reviewing everything. The chairman's voice turned icy. You have 72 hours. Meanwhile, back at the vineyard, Olivia noticed unfamiliar vehicles parked near the entrance. Several strangers were questioning workers. Others were photographing buildings. One local reporter approached her. Miss Bennett, is it true you've convinced Ethan Blackwood to cancel the resort because of a personal relationship? Olivia froze. What? The reporter smiled. So you don't deny there's a relationship? She walked away without answering. By evening, rumors had spread across social media. Headlines claimed the billionaire had abandoned his company because he had fallen in love with the vineyard owner. Television commentators mocked him. Business analysts questioned his judgment. Investors began selling company shares. Olivia sat alone on the porch that night, staring across the moonlit vines. She whispered to herself, this is my fault. If she had never challenged Ethan, none of this would have happened. The next morning she packed a single suitcase. When Ethan returned from the city, he found the guest house empty. Only one envelope rested on the kitchen table. He opened it immediately. Inside was a handwritten letter. Ethan, you came here intending to save a business. Instead, you found problems that never should have become yours. Your company, your reputation, and thousands of employees depend on the decisions you make next. I can't allow this vineyard to become the reason you lose everything your family built. Don't look for me. Please finish what you came here to do. Thank you for giving this place 30 unforgettable days. Olivia. Ethan lowered the letter slowly. For the first time in many years, he felt truly alone. That evening he walked through the vineyard by himself. He remembered Samuel's words. This vineyard belongs to everyone willing to protect it. He remembered Olivia laughing when he sprayed himself with water. He remembered making pasta, watching fireworks, the old letter from his father. For the first time in his career, he realized success wasn't measured by what you owned. It was measured by what you refused to sacrifice. 2 days later, Ethan called an emergency press conference. Journalists filled every seat. Television cameras pointed toward the stage. Everyone expected him to announce construction of the luxury resort. Instead, he stepped to the podium and quietly said, I owe the public the truth. The room fell silent. He explained how his father had once been saved financially by Olivia's grandfather. He revealed the forgotten promise. Then he displayed copies of the original handwritten letter. I cannot erase the history my family promised to protect. Questions exploded across the room. What about the resort? What about investors? What about your shareholders? Ethan answered calmly. The vineyard will remain exactly where it belongs. A reporter shouted. Then how do you plan to recover the billions you've already invested? Ethan smiled. By building something better. The screen behind him changed. New architectural designs appeared. Instead of replacing the vineyard, the resort would be built around it. Historic buildings would be restored. The vineyards would remain untouched. Luxury cottages would overlook the grape fields. Local families would become business partners instead of losing their livelihoods. The project would combine sustainable tourism, local agriculture, and world-class hospitality. The room erupted with surprise. No one had expected such a solution. Not everyone celebrated. Within hours, Blackwood International's board held another emergency meeting. Their decision was unanimous. Ethan Blackwood was removed as CEO. After 12 years leading the company, he walked away carrying only one small box containing family photographs and a single fountain pen his father had once owned. Outside headquarters, reporters surrounded him. "Do you regret your decision?" Ethan paused before answering. "No." "What will you do now?" He smiled. "Build something worth remembering." 6 months later, the vineyard looked more alive than ever. Historic stone buildings had been beautifully restored. Local families managed restaurants featuring regional recipes. Young artists displayed their work throughout the estate. Guests from around the world visited not only for luxury, but for authenticity. Business magazines called it the future of sustainable tourism. Travel publications ranked it among the country's most remarkable destinations. Ironically, it became even more profitable than the original resort project. Former investors who had laughed at Ethan now wished they had believed in his vision. Olivia had returned shortly after construction began. She couldn't stay away after learning what Ethan had sacrificed. Together they spent months rebuilding the vineyard. Not as billionaire and employee. Not as owner and caretaker. But as partners. One autumn evening, the vineyard hosted its grand reopening. Music echoed across the hills. Families gathered beneath thousands of glowing lights hanging between rows of vines. Samuel raised a toast. To new beginnings. Everyone applauded. As the celebration continued, Ethan quietly led Olivia toward the old oak tree where her grandfather had once taught her to plant young vines. She smiled. "You've been suspiciously quiet tonight." "I've been trying to find the right words." He reached into his jacket pocket. Instead of an expensive diamond ring, he held a simple vintage ring. "My grandmother wore this for 52 years. Olivia's eyes widened. "My father once told me that love isn't proven by grand gestures." He took a slow breath. "It's proven by the choices we make when something more valuable than money is at stake." He looked directly into her eyes. "When I came here, I thought I was buying land." His voice softened. "But I found a home." He smiled gently. "And I found the woman who reminded me who I wanted to become." He knelt on one knee. "Olivia Bennett." There was never a contract. There was never a plan. There was only 30 days that somehow changed my entire life. He opened the small ring box. "Will you marry me?" Tears filled Olivia's eyes before she laughed softly. "You know, you still owe my grandfather one promise." Ethan smiled. "I know." She nodded through happy tears. "Then let's keep it together." "Yes." Around them, applause erupted as family, workers, and townspeople celebrated. Fireworks lit the night sky once again, their reflections dancing across the vineyard that had nearly disappeared forever. Years later, visitors would admire the breathtaking estate and praise Ethan Blackwood's brilliant business vision. But those who truly knew the story understood something much deeper. The vineyard had not been saved by money. It had been saved by loyalty, by forgiveness, and by two people who discovered that the richest life is built not on wealth, but on love, purpose, and the courage to protect what truly matters.